I'm Kyle Burke. I'm the lead application developer on Ujo.
Hey, I'm Jon Schwartz. I'm another software engineer on Ujo.
Hey guys, welcome to DISCON. Thanks for coming to Boulder for the conference.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, so why don't you tell our audience what Ujo is all about?
Sure, so Ujo is a software company that's building solutions for the music industry on blockchain technology. So I guess the product right now kind of just stands as a way to upload your content, timestamp it in the blockchain, and then license it without any intermediaries. So you're selling directly from fan to consumer, artist to consumer. And so we're trying to change the way that fans interact with their artists.
Mm-hmm. Great, so how does it compare to existing models that we know, so like Bandcamp or iTunes, or can you...
You want to speak to that?
Yeah, sure. So what Ujo is doing now is probably most similar to Bandcamp. We're not really trying to like compete with Spotify or iTunes. They are doing what they do, and they do it well. Like, we aren't really trying to fight for power. But what we do really want to do is, just like Kyle said, create that direct artist-to-fan relationship where transactions don't have to go through any unnecessary middlemen, right? Mm-hmm. Not only are we trying to help artists make more money by doing that, but also allow fans to like contribute everything that they want that goes directly to the artist as well, right?
Yeah, so right now we need to compete to a certain degree to build usable experiences for the end user. But at the end of the day, what makes our product special is the uniqueness of what blockchain technology can actually do for the music industry. So if we can create, unique experiences with things like non-fungible tokens, that's really what we want to pursue, is the exciting new frontier of how fans and artists interact.
That's great. It sounds like a great value, not just for the end user who's listening to the music, but also for the artist who's trying to find a unique market. So
exactly.
So can you describe maybe the process of how an artist goes about to publish their material through your platform, and how they end up uploading the files, where they live, and so on? Sure.
So some of the technical architecture behind some of this is we use IPFS as our main content of storage, both for metadata and content itself. And so the content identifiers to that information gets timestamped in the blockchain. And so we're essentially serving these files directly from a decentralized storage network, and we're using a lot of open source components, such as our registry of content, and then also our badges stuff. So there's things that we're doing with non-fungible tokens, like I mentioned before, such as allowing people to support artists directly, and then also get a badge that represents how early they found out and supported these artists. So it's a provable piece of uniqueness for that content. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of interesting features that you can imagine building on top of some of this foundational protocol.
Well, that feature is particularly interesting because I haven't heard too much about anybody else doing that particular feature of a fan getting to have the ability to claim themselves as the first fan, or to gain a reputation of an early adopter in the music,
It's really cool because other applications can also develop with that sort of data in mind. Like, it's available to everyone. That's the beauty of decentralization. So like, other applications could build stuff where the first 10 badge holders have access to certain content or certain concerts or stuff like that, right? That's not special to the creators portal, which is like the application that we are working on, which is built on Ujo, which might sound a little like confusing, but other applications can be built using that information as well.
So what about privacy? What about a music fan that doesn't want other people to know what they listen to? Like, let's say that they have a hidden pleasure, like Milli Vanilli, or they're not very proud of what they listen to. Can they be a private follower?
That's really interesting. That's actually not something we've really thought about, but use a different wallet address? Yeah,
just
I think
create an obscure account.
You can kind of skirt around that a little bit. But it's funny also to think of like you could, I guess, at the end of the day, have multiple wallet addresses that represent like your different tastes over the years. So like my wallet address from high school would probably have some music that you wouldn't want to hear. But like now, I'm pretty comfortable with sharing my listening interest to other people.
It was just a funny thought.
Yeah.
So. Now, it is sort of structured around providing royalties to artists and independent artists in particular, and But what about public domain music that is freely available? Do you have to pay a gas fee in order to get something into the system, or in order to listen to something? Or what about freely available music?
So we've actually been thinking about kind of open source content, essentially. I mean, I think the thing that would still require is actually still timestamping it on the blockchain. So we're saying that in a way you create the license that says this is free and open for use, right? And like gas costs are fairly low at this point. Like maybe you'd pay a couple cents in order to do that, but you would then essentially open it up to, you know, anyone who wants to reuse this content in interesting ways or build on top of like what I've done. I think it creates interesting network effects when you can kind of open source some of this stuff.
Gotcha. Yeah, it seems the gas cost is inevitable to publish something because it has to be recognized as being published, comparable to maybe a copyright registration fee or something like that.
Yeah.
But for the listener, do they have to pay to listen to some free music?
So at the end of the day, well, sorry, not at the end of the day. Currently, we do streaming is available for anyone. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
So that's not part of the licensing content at this point. That is something that we are delving into fairly quickly, and we realize that essentially having a transaction for every time you stream a song is not feasible at a larger scale. Like this would clog up the network. So we're starting to experiment with things like state channels or plasma cache or other solutions that can kind of facilitate high, I guess, transaction requirements, but not bogging down the network.
And just to build on that, if an artist decides to set their release price or a price of a single to be $0, then any fan can download that for free. Whereas if they decide like, hey, this is worth $5, then to download it, the listener would have to pay.
Requires a transaction.
Right. So,
but the transaction is required to acquire the rights or to put it into your ownership, or to that you have it. But then you can download it multiple times from there, right?
And exactly, under the hood, that's another event that is logged in Ethereum, on Ethereum's blockchain, right? So it will never, like if you switch, recently I switched from iTunes to Spotify, Apple Music, Spotify. I had to re-download all my music, which was kind of a pain. So now it's like if I've bought this with any Ethereum address, I've bought a release, forever, as long as Ethereum is alive, that will exist on my Ethereum address.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we're focused as an organization in doing is actually opening up an ecosystem as opposed to like specifically just creating a product, right? Like we are creating the creators portal just because we're experimenting with the like kind of procedural protocol stuff, but at the end of the day, like we don't want to build a streaming platform. We want to have a platform that enables streaming, right? So like if you're an application and you say like, hey, I plan on making sure that people pay for their content appropriately, and that the splits are going properly to the artists, like, yeah, we don't want to own all sides of the market. We want to kind of facilitate how that should happen, and then allow other applications to build on top of what's best intended for both the creator and the fan, because that's what it's all about, right? It's about building these good incentivization systems for both parties to behave properly, right? Because currently there's asymmetry in the market where what's good for the fan is not necessarily good for the consumer. Like, is it great to be able to pay $5 and have access to like any music in the world? Sure, but at the end of the day, is that sustainable for the music industry in the long term? Maybe not.
Okay. It's fascinating how blockchain is transforming the music industry in that way, and lots of potential for changing the playing field and helping the independent artist.
Totally.
So when somebody uploads a file, does it get encoded into multiple files? Like, is there the FLAC option, or is there the MP3 option? Or since you're storing on IPFS, some of the people that understand these technologies might be curious how that you're handling that.
Yeah, so there's two parts to it, and you can fill in the gaps if I miss anything. One of the issues is piracy. So we get the question a lot, like, what are you doing about piracy? And our approach to it is we assume that the way that artists are going to make money are by passionate fans. So all we need to do is build systems for passionate fans to know that the money that they spend is going to artists, we would assume that most people would behave properly, right? At the end of the day, can you do anything about piracy in the broad scope? Like, no. If someone wants access to content badly enough, they're going to find a way to do it. So we are experimenting with potentially storing the content itself encoded so that it's not available to anyone who just has like access to the CID, but you need something that unlocks it. So we've been playing with the idea of limited digital releases. So like if you buy a non-fungible token, that means you have the key to unlock that content and not anyone can just go listen to it. And then the other part of what you were talking about is multiple file formats. That's one of the things that we look at, that like it's fairly difficult, technically difficult to build, and it doesn't necessarily add a bunch of value to what we're doing. So right now we're focusing on like MP3, which is a fairly lightweight format compared to like WAV files or something else, and is most accessible to people. In the future, will we need to address this? Like 100%. But right now this is kind of like a stepping stone for us, where it's like we might not see that much return on investment in terms of like dev time to build some of that stuff out.
Are you finding that some artists are providing exclusive content on your platform, or do you have some bragging rights or some some way to have unique content that is not found elsewhere?
Totally. I think that's one of the things we're looking to experiment with limited digital sales. So you could say like only 300 people in the world who buy this album are then going to have access to that content. And then you can start to do a lot of interesting things with artists who potentially don't want to share their content in the traditional forms. I don't know if you have anything to add on top of that.
Yeah, no, I mean, you pretty much covered a lot of it. I think like for an artist right now, and this is sort of getting back to a point that I had mentioned earlier about like competing with other services that are out there. Like if you are an artist who is really destined to become like famous or make a full-time living from your art, then it's kind of like not an option for you to like stick with only one service. You have to like put your music out there to everyone. So it's not really something that is like a fair ask. I would argue, I don't know necessarily where like the whole team would stand on that, but I don't believe that's something like, hey, exclusively doing something through Ujo is something that is the best for the artist as well. Right? So as long as for us we're helping artists make more money, then they should want to do that. And that's kind of the route that we would, or I think we would prefer to take.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Well, it's great speaking to you guys here at DISCON in Boulder. And
thank you.
Do you guys have anything else to add about the future, your direction, or where you might be heading next, and where people can interact with you?
Not me.
Yeah, I don't know. I just say like support the creatives. These are people that have a lot of conviction in life and have a certain direction. And I think that at this point in time they don't want to play by the conventional rules, the way that society is kind of like boxed them in terms of how they can express themselves. And so by experimenting with some of this decentralized technology to do what you want with your creative identity, I think is super important. So, rah-rah on that.
All right. High five.
Cool.